All right. Are we ready to get into this thing? I think we are. All right. I know a lot of people are tuned in right now because I said yesterday we had I received an email from Darkside Phil after. Let me just kind of back up. So on Monday, I was kind of going through. I was casually mentioned, maybe it was earlier this month, on the first of this month. I just kind of casually mentioned who we're going to have on the show. We're going to have James, Angry Video Game Nerd. He's going to be a co-host. We're going to have Jeremy from Geeks and Gamers on the show. We're going to have Captain Agent reporting from Super Nintendo World. I also mentioned that we're going to have Darkside Phil on the show. And it was like pretty much immediately after, it was like my Twitter just blew up all day, and a clip went out of the show, and people were like, DSP is going to be on side scrollers, and this was like, I guess it was news to me that it was news to anybody else. I didn't really think it was like that big a deal, but apparently, and I didn't know this, like Darkside Phil doesn't do many interviews, right? I think the last one he did, I've been educated. There was the last one he did was with the Quartering, and that was like 3 years ago. And people were not super happy with how that interview went. They felt like it was kind of like softballs. And I'm like, I would say I'm 80% of the way through that interview, but I've also been watching like the retort to that by It's a Gundam. And the long and short of it is that I've received like a lot of lots of people saying like, well, you need to check out this. You need to check out this. And I spent over the last 2 days, I probably spent 12 hours doing research on this, which is a lot of research to do for one interview. And I'll continue to do interviews, right? Or continue to do research on this. But I wanted to, so Phil sent me an email, and I wanted to read it to you guys because he's like, hey, you can make this available to everybody. And because usually, in private correspondence, I'm not going to like share private correspondence, but Phil said you can share it. So I'm going to share it with you guys. And I'm going to share my response to it. And just so everybody's on the same page, because you guys know that I pride myself on transparency with the audience, with literally everything that we do. And we can kind of talk about this because I do think there's a larger conversation to be had here. But a lot of people have been saying, oh, Phil's going to cancel. Phil's going to cancel. Phil has given no indication that he's going to cancel. And there are a lot of people saying that Phil's going to give you things you can't say and can't say. Phil's given no indication of things that we can and cannot talk about. So I'm just going to read this email, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to screen cap it or whatever. And that's fine. And but I took a screen cap of it because I didn't want to include his email on it. I didn't want to include my email on it. This is just a screen cap of it, but so you guys can take it out as well. So here we go. Let's check this out. So it says, hey man, listen to the show from today before I go to sleep, and you mentioned my appearance on the show. Then I see you get bombarded by comments on the video, and my haters, of course, bringing up their usual stuff and pretty much demanding you ask me all about it, or else you are just quote unquote softballing it. People have wanted to interview me for years, and I just stay in my lane, making content for my audience and ignoring all the outside drama as much as I can. So that's why this is going to blow up. You're literally the first person since the Quartering to interview me, and that was many years ago, which I had no idea when I reached out to Phil. Like when I reached out to Phil, it was like, it was, like I said, I've just kind of seen him from a distance on the peripheral, Darkside Phil is trending. I wonder why. Never actually like looked into why. It's like, oh, I remember Phil. I see references to him in like Gundam videos, right? Or just various videos, and that's where, like I said, he's like a meme lord, right? Because I thought people were just kind of making fun of him because it was kind of fun to make fun of Phil. So that's when I say he's like a meme lord, that's what I mean. Like people make fun of Phil. So anyways, let's continue. It says, I'm not going to give you any list of questions that will be off limits, and I'll answer everything to the best of my ability you can throw at me. But of course, but I also, of course, am not going to put myself or my family at risk with my answers. That is exactly the kind of thing my trolls have tried and tried again and always failed, which is why they are seeing this as just a new opportunity to quote expose me and somehow get me to either admit to something I've done but I haven't, or else slip up and somehow admit something that will prove all their crazy conspiracy theories about me. Neither of these things are going to happen because the stuff they say about me from the last 5+ years is 99% untrue. I do have two concerns. Number one, my and my family's safety. These people have thoroughly doxed me, my wife, all of our personal data, including address, place of work, and cell phone numbers, plus my wife's personal history before we even met, in addition to my parents and other family members. It stands to reason that I don't want any of that stuff on the show, but I guarantee there'll be things like super chatting to try to get it on the screen or posting in your chat nonstop. I do need
sorry, that's a good way to get banned real quick. So just
I mean, with anybody, with any like
yes.
I'm like on any chat room, in any in any conversation, it doesn't matter if we're talking to Phil or
Anybody.
Obama. It doesn't matter. Like the idea is that you post anybody's personal information and you're going to be banned.
Illegal. Doxing's illegal.
So he says, I do need a level of buy-in from you that this won't be a nonstop harass-a-thon where people are going to see our personal info on your streams because I'm on your show, and I feel that's a pretty reasonable request. Like I said, I don't care who I'm interviewing. I don't think that's unreasonable at all. And just me personally, I don't think that's unreasonable. And if anybody feels that's unreasonable, I don't really know what to tell you. Like, it's reasonable to expect privacy. It's reasonable to expect that your personal information isn't going to be leaked out online. Number two, I want this to not just be a show completely interrogating me. I really like you and your content over all these years. I'd very much like to share my story of being an original G1 and how we originally met at MagFest, which I didn't even know, if you remember, being 13 years ago, which I did not remember that. Did not remember that at all. It says, I'd like to be a normal part of your show, like every other guest has been. I'm okay with it, with a long segment about me, but I'll also be there to have fun with your normal antics. If that's okay, I'm still down to be on the show. And I know I'll be bombarded with questions about this tomorrow because you've now spilled the beans. I give you 100% permission to share this email with your audience and make your own judgments. And I hope you still have me on because I feel like we'll have a fun time. So that's kind of where it's at. So that was the email that he sent. But I do think it's important that I share my response to that email. Once again, in the interest of being transparent with everybody. So my response was this. It says, hey, Phil, yeah, it's been an interesting 24 hours. I'll say this. Your safety and your family's safety is of the utmost concern to me. We certainly won't allow any doxing or personal information to be shared in the chat. And if they are shared via super chat, we'll remove them. That's not cool in any scenario. And I stand by that. I don't think that's fair to anybody. I don't want this to be an interrogation either. I do think that there are some questions that should be asked and answered, and I expect you to answer them as best you can, as long as you don't put you or your family's family in harm's way. If you legally can't talk about something, just say you can't legally talk about it. I'm a fair interviewer, fair to me, fair to the person who's being interviewed, and fair to the audience. There is no right questions that can be asked. And I want to kind of elaborate on that even further. I know, I'll continue reading this. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to have you on and allowing us to talk. I do think that it would be ignorant for us to treat this like a normal show, especially the first time. We need to address the elephant in the room before we can treat things quote unquote normal, which I would love to get to. With all that said, I look forward to this challenge and I appreciate your trust. So that was my response to Phil's email. And I'll say this, so I clearly, like, when I reached out to Phil, I clearly didn't know that there are this many detractors. I guess that's the term, detractors, that are of Phil. And like, you can like or hate whoever you want online. That's fine. But I feel like I'm in a very tough situation to where I can ask everything that everybody has ever wanted to know about Phil, why he, if he's played WWE champions, how much he's spent on this game, his Patreon goals, which weren't fulfilled, or, all these, I mean, I have literally an entire Word doc of things, and I can ask literally all these questions, but somebody's going to be mad at me for not asking something in the way that they felt it should be asked. And I don't think that's necessarily fair to me. I don't think that's necessarily fair to anybody, right? So like I fully intend on doing this interview, but I want to be like honest with everybody. I'm going to do my best. I've spent a ton of time researching for this, being like learning about the critiques on Phil, learning Phil's responses. I think the biggest thing that I think that with all this, and I'll talk to Phil about this, is I think all this whole thing started, at least majority of it. A lot of people talk about this WWE Champions game. I think the biggest thing with it is, the amount of money that he supposedly spent. I think a lot of this starts with it's like a white lie. Like it started with like, hey Phil, do you play this game? This says this is your name on this game, and it looks like you spent a lot of money on this game, and nobody, and he could have just been like, yeah, I do. But instead he was like, no, and he kept doubling down, no,
Nate,
to where
add a little bit, just
sure.
one thing. Anybody's bankruptcy information, that's not anybody else's business. That's not our business. And yes, you may say, well, it proves this, but you shouldn't have had that information anyway. You shouldn't have went digging for that information anyway. It's bankruptcy information is not your information to have.
Well, I'll say this, like, look, I think in the one of the things wrong with journalism, I think in right now is people go in with an agenda. I don't want to enter any interview with an agenda, right? Like I want to go into an interview with questions, and I want those questions answered as best as we can. There's people say, oh, you can find this stuff, it's public information. I get it, right? And there are things like, why you see a lot of people say, he makes this amount of money per year. Why is he always poor? Why is he always asking for money? I don't know. Like that's a good question to ask. So look, I think that Adam, you said this best. I'm in a no-win situation here, right? I'm in a no-win situation where I'm going to do my best to deliver a great interview as best I can. Like I said, I walked into a snake pit, right? And I have snakes all around me. And I don't mean that like, the detractors are snakes and like, the metaphorical sense of like, bad people or anything like that. But, I'm walking into a trap, and I can figure out the solution, but I'm still going to leave with bruises, scrapes and bruises and stuff. And that concerns me. I want to do what's best for this show. I want to do what's best for me more than anything. Like I said, Phil's a guy that I've, he's been an acquaintance. Like I said, I haven't talked to him literally since his first email in well over a decade. So what's happened between then, I'm just now learning. But my ultimate responsibility is, for this show, for you guys, and for my family. So I want to do the best job I can possibly do. I'm going to do the best job I can possibly do. And when I say I'm in a no-win situation, it's because ultimately, no matter what I do, people aren't going to be happy with it. And I think that's kind of the most sobering aspect of this, because I realize I'm on the internet and people are going to do their best to, people are going to do their best to critique literally everything I say right now. People are going to critique it, because I have somehow stepped into this lore, which I didn't mean to by any means. I'm just a dude who likes to talk video games, and that's it. So that's kind of where it's at. So I'm going to do my best. I'm working with as many detractors as I possibly can. I've DM'd several of them to say, like, what would you like asked? And I will ask those questions, but I'm going to ask them in a polite way. I'm not going to shine the light on this guy and you need to say this. Like, I'm going to be respectful to his time. And, but with that said, that doesn't mean they're going to be softball questions. I do think that there's questions that need to be asked, and that there's questions that should be answered. So that's kind of where it's at. So